Hello and welcome to Math Lessons with Linda. Today's topic is the quadratic formula. I've done many videos on different ways to solve quadratic equations, and this is one that I don't believe we've yet covered. So let's talk about what the quadratic formula is and why we would want to use it. So most of you probably recognize what the formula looks like. And the reason you would want to use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation is because not all quadratics are factorable. And what that means is that your answers maybe would either be like a radical or a decimal, or your answer might actually be imaginary numbers. And so the quadratic formula is the one method where you can solve any quadratic at any time. It works for everything, no matter what kind of answers you're going to get. So today we are going to use this formula, and let's just talk about it real quick. It is x, which we're solving for, is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus a big square root underneath which we have b squared minus 4 times a times c. That entire value is over 2a. So where do we get the a and the b and the c from? So here's our first equation we're going to do. X squared plus 8x minus 4 equals 0. Now, just looking at this 4 for my last value, 4 has only two sets of factors, 1 times 4 and 2 times 2, and neither one of those pairs gives me values that would add up or subtract to 8. So I'm pretty sure I cannot factor this, which tells me I would have either a radical answer or a decimal answer, depending on how you would like to express it. So the quadratic formula is a good choice for this. Now, the a, b, and c are just the coefficients in this problem. The important thing is to have the squared term first, and this is a 1x squared. Then we have the x term, and then we have the constant. So for this equation, that a value is the coefficient on my x squared, so it's 1. The b is the coefficient on the x term, so 8. And the c, I take the sign in front of it, so it is negative 4. So now I'm ready just to substitute all of my values in and solve. Now, the x is because that's what my variable is. Now, even if your equation has a different variable in it, you still set it up the same way. Some equations use different variables other than x. So I'm going to have x equals the opposite of b. So b is 8, so I'm going to make it negative 8. Plus or minus a big square root. B squared, which is 8 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, and then times negative 4, which is c. All of that divided by 2 times a, which is 1 again. So now we have some cleaning up to do under the radical first. So I'm going to leave my negative 8 and then plus or minus, and under here I'm going to get 64. And be careful when you do this, because I have a negative times a positive times a negative, which that's going to make that a plus. So negative 4 times 1 times another negative 4 is 16, and I already know it's positive. And then in my denominator, 2 times 1 is 2. So in my next step, I'm going to have negative 8 plus or minus, and underneath my radical is 80. Now, at this point, you'll either be asked to express your answer as a radical or a decimal. So if it's going to be a decimal, you can go ahead and figure out what the square root of 80 is and then do the rest of the calculations. But I'm going to leave mine as a radical just because it looks a little bit neater. I'm going to move up here. So I have to take, I'll leave my negative 8. I have to take the square root of 80 and simplify that radical into its smallest components, which 16 times 5 is 80, and the square root of 16 is a perfect square. That's why I chose that. So it is 4, and I keep my radical here, 5, and then I have 2. And I am almost finished. I have one more step. So some teachers call it the triangle, where if you have these three numbers are all divisible by the same value, you can reduce each of them. So all of these are divisible by 2, so I'm going to reduce negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Keep my plus or minus. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Keep my square root of 5. And then 2 divided by 2 just makes it 1, so I don't have a denominator that I need to write anymore. So here is my solution to my quadratic. X is equal to negative 4 plus 2 square root of 5, or negative 4 minus 2 square root of 5. If you did need to graph this for some reason, you would have to then estimate the radical to get values to place on your graph. But for just solving, you can leave your answer exactly like this, and that is how we use the quadratic formula.